Good morning and welcome to so many colleagues already from all over Europe, I suppose. Um, One question to all of you coming into the webinar at the moment, if you could please share your affiliation and country that you're calling in from in the chat. It will be great to see how widely spread we are today. We'll wait for a few more minutes. Thank you all for joining us. This is the DIAMAS project webinar, Navigating Europe's Institutional Publishing Landscape. So if you're looking out for that, you're in the right place. And I kindly ask you to share your affiliation and country you're calling in from in the chat and give us an overview where you're calling, how widely spread we are today. There we go. Many people attending at this moment. We're up to 130 participants already. We're expecting quite a lot. We had more than 400 registrants. So I'll wait a few more minutes and welcome all of you calling in from all over Europe, I see. And we're picking up on numbers. We're on more than 150 now. Welcome to all of you. If you're looking for the DIAMAS project webinar, Navigating Europe's Institutional Publishing Landscape, and are interested in the results of the survey, then you're in the right place. For all newcomers, please, I invite you to share your affiliation and country or city you're calling in from in the chat. I'll wait one more minute and then I suggest we get started. And for all of you who haven't done so, please mute yourself. Perfect. More people coming in. A warm welcome to all the newcomers. One final round. Welcome to all of you from all over Europe, I see. If you are willing to share your affiliation and the country or city that you're calling in from in the chat, that will be most welcome and we can see how widely spread we are today. And when people are still coming in, I suggest we get started. We have a full program today. So for all of you joining the webinar, thank you for being here. And I'll start with a brief introduction and then we go to the presentations. So dear colleagues, a very warm welcome to this DIAMAS project webinar entitled Navigating Europe's Institutional Publishing Landscape. My name is Martine Pronk. I'm Executive Director of LIBER, and LIBER is Europe's largest network organization for research libraries and one of DIAMAS' consortium partners. And I am happy to be your host today and see so many of you attending. Before I start the introduction, I would kindly like to invite you again to share in the chat your affiliation and where you're calling in from, and please mute yourself. Welcome to this event, and the event gives you insight in the findings of the Institutional Publishing Landscape Survey that are presented in the DIAMAS Project Landscape Report, Institutional Publishing in the European Research Area, the results from the DIAMAS survey. We will focus on regional and national trends and diversity. And finally, we will take a look into the future and explore implications of the findings and highlight future developments regarding Diamond Open Access Publishing. I warmly welcome our speakers for today. Jan-Erik Fransbroek, Open Access Advisor and Academic Librarian at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Eva Melenchak-Slody, E-Resources and Scholarly Communication Librarian at the University of Zagreb, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. And Johan Rorik, Executive Director of Coalition S and Co-Editor-in-Chief of the Diamond Journal Glossa. Now, this event builds on the work of DIAMAS, a Horizon Europe project that aims to understand and support institutional publishing, paying particular attention to initiatives that do not charge fees to read or publish scholarly outputs, meaning Diamond Open Access publications. You will find the link to the full report and recently published synopsis in the chat for your convenience. And before I hand over to our first speaker, I will give a brief introduction to today's event. Starting September 2022, one of the goals of the European Commission-funded DIAMAS project was to map the landscape of institutional open access publishers and service providers in the European research area in order to better understand the nature of their services for Diamond Open Access scholarly journals and other outputs. The DIAMAS project's institutional publishing landscape report is the result of this effort. It is intended to help academic institutions engaged in scholarly publishing to better understand the nature of their publishing services in a national and international context and take measures to further align and increase the demonization of the European institutional publishing landscape. The landscape report also provides a basis for the subsequent phases of the DIAMAS project, where the self-assessment tool is being developed to allow institutional publishers and service providers to evaluate themselves in terms of the extensible quality standard for institutional publishing, or EXIP, developed in DIAMAS. This will improve the coordination, the quality, and sustainability of institutional publishers. And in addition, the landscape report will enable DIAMAS to formulate policy and strategy recommendations for research performing organizations, for funders, sponsors, and donors, and regional, national, and international policymakers to support the open access publishing activities of institutional publishers and service providers across the area. Now, we will start with the presentations of our three speakers, which lasts us with about 30 minutes of panel discussions, hopefully. If you have any questions during the presentations of our speakers or the panel discussion, please put them in the chat. We are monitoring the conversation and we will have time to answer your questions at the end. If you want to ask someone specific, please indicate who you would like to answer. Before we start, some final household rules with which you probably are familiar, but nevertheless, I would kindly ask you to turn your camera and microphone off to not distract or interrupt the speakers. And just so that you, if you haven't noticed before, this is a recorded session. The webinar is recorded for future dissemination, as was stated on the event page. And also for this reason, we prefer your cameras off. And for your information, the slides of the speakers will be shared afterwards via Zenodo. So you can have a look at them afterwards. Well, without further ado, I'm happy to introduce to you our first speaker today, Jan-Erik Fransborg, who is an open access advisor and academic librarian at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway, and he is also work package leader in the DIAMAS project. Jan-Erik will start with giving us insights on the background of the survey and an overview of the highlights of the main findings. Jan-Erik, this is it for me. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And the next thing is, will I be able to find the right screen to share? As you know, there we are, I hope. And I have to. Yes. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to see all of you. I see a number of names and faces I have met throughout the years. I've been working in the vicinity of these problems for some 25 years. So, and the DIAMAS project is the summit, or what should you call it, of my academic career here. Now I'm going to talk you through the highlights of, some highlights of the DIAMAS landscape report as I see them. See now, let's see, have a look at the research background, the project background. It's a known fact from before, from earlier research, that has shown that there are problems with the structure of open access publishing. To quote the Open Access Diamond Journal study, which I was a part of, and many of the other participants in the DIAMAS participated also in that project, we found a wide archipelago of relatively small journals serving diverse communities. Which means it's small, it's disorganized or organized in very small entities spread around. Now, that is Diamond Open Access Publishing. But Diamond Open Access Publishing is an important part of institutional publishing. And DIAMAS has been settled to look at institutional publishing. So there is some connection here between Diamond and institutional publishing. So that is some kind of starting point for this project. What work have we done? Well, the work package 2, which I have been happy to lead, some 40 competent and interested persons from around 20 organizations all over Europe participated in the work. We started work in September 2022, and we delivered the report at the end of November 2023. So there's some 15 months work, by many persons that went into this report. We had little to build on. What we found that was no or little data previously collected on institutional publishing as such. There was no organizations geared to institutional publishing as such. There were, of course, studies and organizations directed at some aspect of institutional publishing. Like we have organizations like WASPA and the Association of European University Presses are relevant, but only taking part of this. So we had to start from scratch. So we decided after some consideration that we need to initiate a large survey to collect data for this whole area of institutional publishing. And during this, we coined the term institutional publishing service provider, which encompasses institutional publishing activities, service providers to such IPs, and all those institutional combinations of institutional publishing and service providing to themselves or to others. There are a number of constellations possible in this, we found out. So what did we do? Well, we created a survey that took work. We are trying to cover many aspects. What did we want to know? We want to know very much to be able to analyze this. On the other hand, we had to take into consideration that responding to service takes time. So we had to try to be short enough. Many will say we didn't reach a suitable balance here. Some will say we know too little. Someone will say we ask too much. Then whom to send this survey to? Well, we tried identifying IPs and service providers in ERA. And ERA is the European Research Area, which is not the same as Europe. So if you want to know more about that, look at the scoping report, which has been published before. You will find links to that later in this presentation, and the landscape report. The data we had to start with was skewed towards open access journal publishing. And some data we found was also relevant to open access and toll access book publishing, and also to toll access journal publishing. And then we engaged the networks we knew of. And what we knew of, I mean, where did we come from? Most of us come from Diamond Open Access. That means that the dissemination and the networks were skewed towards Diamond Open Access. This was not a goal and something we had tried to compensate for, but we might not have succeeded in that. From late March to early May 2023, we sent out more than 5,000 email messages with links to the survey in 10 different languages. We also sent out email lists and to organizations we knew of, asking them to distribute to their membership. So conservative guess would be that some 10,000 invitations to participate in the survey have been sent out. In January, there was a major earthquake in Turkey. Turkey was intended to be part of the survey, but due to the circumstances, we postponed the survey in Turkey until September. A country report for Turkey is in the making, and we will make it available later this year. We're not quite sure yet whether we'll include it in what we have published already, or whether we'll publish it as a separate document. Follow us on Zenodo, and you will know. Let's have a look at some of the results that we see from the survey. Well, what did we get? We got 685 responses that we could use. There's always some responses you have to discard for various reasons. There was quite an uneven geographical distribution, but comparing to other numbers we find that most countries are adequately represented, and we also have numbers that indicate that a major part of IPSPs are represented. For instance, there's no reason to believe that less than half of the journals published in Europe by institutions are not represented in the survey, and that is good. But we also see that the smallest institutional publishers are underrepresented, especially the standalone journals. Many reasons for that. They might be difficult to reach out to, and they may lack the most important resource to respond to a survey, time. And that's all part of their situation. So when we describe the landscape in the report, one can assume that the situation is a bit worse than what we find in our numbers, because those who are in the worst circumstances are the ones who haven't responded to the survey. About 3/4 of the respondents are institutional publishers, and a quarter are service providers. This is how they present themselves, but we see from the survey data that respondents who have very similar profiles, some say they are service providers, some say they're institutional publishers. So this is the kind of distinction that is a bit difficult to not to trust, but we're not really often not certain what to make of it, because respondents are obviously in doubt. We also found that 90% of our respondents publish journals, but most publish relatively few. Less than 5 journals is the typical respondent. And that's even when the smallest one aren't represented well in the survey. Major findings. Well, we had planned to analyze data on a regional basis. But what we found is that countries are more different than regions are. I mean, countries belonging to the same region could be vastly different, while they could be similar to countries in other regions. So we just skipped the idea about making regional analysis. There was much work and little value in it. Another thing that we at least think we saw from the response is that how scholarly publishing activities are organized on a national scale is very important. It's a matter of support and administrative structures. It's a matter of networks and organization around scholarly publishing and institutional publishing. And of course, about funding opportunities. All this plays into the structure of publishing, and we also see that from the response data. What about finances and organization? That's always something that's interesting, not least for me. I come from the finance department originally. We see that more than 2/3 of the respondents are non-commercial public organizations. We also see, of course, that service providers are more likely to be private companies. Some of them are for-profit shareholding companies on a global scale. Around 60% of IPs and SPs, of institutional publishers and service providers, are part of a parent organizations. And then some 40% are not part of a parent organization. For instance, scholarly societies, they will not have, at least usually not have, a parent organization that can support them. We also see that we're mainly talking about small-scale activities, which are heavily dependent on voluntary and in-kind contributions. And there are a lot of good things to be said about in-kind contribution and voluntary, but it doesn't really fit with growth. If you're successful, you won't get extra resources, so that's one of the problems. We also see that the diamond model is very common among respondents. On the other hand, we see that APC is used as a revenue stream by 19% of open access journals publishers. That doesn't mean that 19% of journals use APC, but among the respondents, 19% of them have one or more journals in their portfolio that use APC. Another thing that is more common that we might have foreseen, nearly 1/4 of our respondents use for one or more journal voluntary author contribution. That means that you say to the author that we don't charge an APC, but we welcome monetary payment from you to support our activities. But it's not mandatory. It doesn't influence whether you are published or not. A bit more. We see that 54% of the publishers that only publish Diamond rely on fixed and permanent funding from their parent organization. And 20% rely on periodically negotiated funding from the parent. And this is a matter of high reliance. So this is a very important part of the financing. 31% of publishers or respondents rely on content and print sales. That means subscription is still in use, and also sale of paper, both for monographs and for journals. But this is generally a funding stream that they put a low reliance on. That is not the most important factor, but for some of their output, it is very important. We also see, contrary to common belief that scholars don't want to, or scholarly institutions don't want to cooperate, some 70% would consider cooperating with others to save costs, at least in some areas. For instance, IT services, production services and training, and support and or advice on publishing policies and best practice are the most important, all with more than 40% of respondents saying we would be inclined to cooperate. They are less inclined to cooperate on areas that influence editorial work and also clerical work like accounting, etc. That could be a result of that. They are part of larger organizations and will have to use their, for instance, accounting departments. Open science practices. What we see is that double anonymous peer review is the most common way of reviewing. 3/4 use this. Open peer review is used by 17%, but around 30% of respondents are willing to implement open peer review in the future. And we should note that many respondents use the open journal system for journal publishing. And open peer review is not yet an option in open journal system. So that is could be one of the reasons that open peer review is not used by more than 17%. We have recently seen news items that PKP, the organizations behind OJS, is now cooperating with others with a view to implement open peer review in OJS in a few years' time. But it will take time, but it will come. We also see that among respondents, 90% of journal output is open access, 76% of conference output, and 58% of academic books. In other words, the open access model is best developed for journals, increasingly for conference output, while academic books still struggle to find an open access model that works for them. And on the bright side, in Eastern Europe, 97% of journals are open access. That's really a high number. Academic journals is the most important output our respondents have. More than 90% of respondents use this output format. 87% of respondents adhere to open access or open science policies on some level, national level, institutional level, or they have their own policies. There is variation between countries. National policies are not important in all countries. And national policies are more important for open access journals than for other types of outputs. We see that only 45% consider the content well indexed, while 55% want improvement. And they say that satisfying technical and non-technical participation criteria, together with metadata criteria, is a problem for 60% of respondents. More than 40% reports that paying for membership and recurring charges is a problem. And we see that the problem is bigger for the smaller institutional publishers than for the others. What we also see there is that aspects of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging is generally not well implemented, and that goes for everyone and all over Europe. There are differences, of course, but generally this is not well done. Some takeaways. The typical institutional publisher is small and rather alone. They need better and more stable, more reliable, and more long-term financing. And they need to use their resources on other things than running after funding. They need partners to cooperate with. Could bigger be better? They need support. Competence must be made available. Advice on best practices and how to best align with these. And they need support on how to implement various practices and technical options. But what we see is strong willingness to align with open sciences practices and good publishing practices. So they want to be good, but they need help. We have some outputs available for you. As I said, the links here will be available when the presentation is made available. There's a treasure trove found on Zenodo for the whole project. And we have, during work package 2, we have the scoping report, which defines concepts and give a precise geographical definition. We have published the survey questionnaire and the accompanying glossary in the English version, not in the other 9 languages. We have the full-length 237-page report, the final landscape report, which also includes some short country reports for the very interested reader. We have longer country reports for some countries. And then we have the synopsis, which is the short version of the full-length report that we hope you all will take the time to read. And then we have the accompanying country reports, the full set of them that will accompany the synopsis. And we also publish data aggregated on a level that allows us to share them. If you would like to see other analysis, contact us. We can't share the full data with you because we have promised the respondents we won't do that. But to some extent, we could be able and willing to work with you to perform more analysis on specific questions. But that we have a question of capacity. That was all from me. Thank you for listening. I hope you will find something interesting in some reports and food for thought and food for action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan-Erik, for sharing this overview of the rich findings of the survey. And like I said before, and also what is placed in the chat, the slides will be available for everyone afterwards. And already there's a link to Zenodo where you can find the so-called treasure trove that Jan-Erik just mentioned in the final slide. Then let's go to our second speaker, who is Eva Melinchak-Slody. And she is e-resources and scholarly communication librarian at the University of Zagreb, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. And in DIAMAS, Eva participates in no less than 4 work packages as an expert. Eva will present outcomes from the report showing regional trends and present a national case study to highlight the diversity of national approaches to institutional publishing. Eva, please, you may start sharing your screen and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martina. Actually, I've shared my screen, so please confirm that you can see it in full screen. Is it okay?
It's perfect.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the introduction, and thank very much to Jan Erik for giving this overview. My presentation will be serving as a kind of bridge between what Jan Erik presented as a current state of institutional publishing and the final presentation from Johan with a vision for the future. And in between, one thing or one aspect of institutional publishing that's really useful in thinking about the future is seeing how it is actually diverse. It is true that many features are universal and many problems and challenges are universal, but there's also diversity across group, and one level of this diversity actually happens on the across countries and across nations. And when picking a certain topics where this diversity is manifested, we can find some topics where it really shows, and when we can see how this diversity shows us the way forward. So I will use some results from the landscape report and especially from some regional reports. I will quite often mention Croatia as a case, not just because I'm biased, but because we agreed beforehand that it could be a useful illustrations for many points. So I hope you will have understanding for that. And I have to say that to repeat actually what Jan Erik stressed, that when looking at regions, we didn't really spot so many differences, and regions were not a proper unit for analysis, but turning to countries and to nations actually give some results that are indicative, and they can serve us and show us how this diversity is affected by different national funding opportunities, by existing platforms and infrastructures, by existing networks of people and organizations, and also by different policies on different levels. So first, to have just an illustration of what was already mentioned, but maybe to have it more clear how between regions we can find differences at the just in answering the simple questions of how much of the IPSP's content is available in open access. So in bright orange, you can see the overall average for, and I've just picked two major output types, journals and books. And you can see what is the overall average. And then you can see how within certain regions are in the same colors, how this can vary. For instance, the Northern Europe, where we can find both Finland and United Kingdom, have Finland has almost 100% journals in open access, so far beyond the average, while United Kingdom has only 84%. And same goes for other regions. For instance, you will have above average number of journals in open access in Croatia and especially in Spain, but not so much, for instance, in Serbia or in Italy. And there are, of course, we have to mention and to say that again, that the sample was a bit affected by the number of results coming from certain countries. So we didn't think that all countries could be equally well represented, but these are the countries that actually provided a good enough number of responses so we can say something about them. And there are large differences, as it's apparent here. So why these national differences matter? As I said, whenever we try to consider future actions that are primarily aimed at increasing the prevalence of open access, but also diamond open access, it's very beneficial that we know where are the gaps and where are the leaders in open access, and that we recognize what's good that's done and what could be improved. And also when we try to tailor the approaches that will work in certain context, then it's important that they are adjusted to the needs of specific circumstances, specific communities, and certain countries. And of course, what I've said before, there are limitations and weaknesses in the service. So in the previous picture, it could be seen that sometimes some smaller groups of respondents could have disproportional impact on the results, but overall, it's still very informative. And two things that are very good for explaining these differences are, one thing is funding and the other things are policies across countries. So what can we say about funding opportunities? We did ask specifically that in the questionnaire. So over the last 3 years, how much have you relied on certain forms of funding, sources of funding, and how stable were they? And what's important is that for all the options that were offered, most of our respondents marked the answer that it's not applicable. So that means that the opportunities vary enormously across IPSPs, and what's available to some is not available to many others. So there is not one single option that we can promote as a good one for the sustainability of diamond and open access publishing. It's true that fixed and permanent subsidies from parent organizations were most often found as both stable and reliable, but even they are not available to all. But another important finding is that what we can recognize as public funding mechanisms, because certain options were named as permanent public or government funding that can be either international, national, or local, or time-limited grants or subsidies, are also considered both very stable and very reliable by an important share of respondents, although they are sometimes time limited. So if they are regular and periodical, they are still considered stable and important and reliable. And this is very consistent with both prior research and what we find in our regional reports. So also when we look at which external funders are important, so which funders do contribute to these national funding schemes, we can see that almost all that were named by our respondents are working on a regional or a national level. So they are most often ministries of government, or associations of scholarly publishing, or some institution, research funding agencies, or something like that. And they mostly, with one exception, only fund publishing activities within their own country or region, or even more local area. So international funders in this case are marginal actors in institutional publishing, and that's something that's important to say. And when we look at those national funding schemes, they often vary very much. They have, what we've seen, that they have diverse sources. Different bodies allocate these fundings. They allocate it for different groups of journals or publishers or institutions. A lot of them have, so not a lot, but some of them have issues with transparency, something that we can, for instance, see in the Serbian regional report, or very much with timeliness. That was very apparent for Croatian national funding scheme. Some of them are very dedicated to supporting Diamond, but some are not. And also they promote through the criteria of awarding this national funding, they promote different kind of values and aims, and they incentivize different behavior by publishers, and sometimes those are not quite ideal. So not everywhere Diamond will be a criteria for publishing, for awarding funding to publishers. For instance, in some countries like Norway, publishing in national language will be promoted, but there are other countries like Croatia or Serbia or Eastern Europe where actually criteria promote publishing in international values, and therefore promoting actually adoption of English as a language for. So some kind of alignment should be achieved on that level. And one other thing that's also important, that as much as these funding schemes are reliant on government and on politics, they are therefore very, very volatile. And that's something, again, what we see in Croatia, that the state that we have captured during the survey changed significantly just within several months after the survey. So if we repeated that, we would have quite a different results here. And that, I think, shows that while national funding schemes are extremely important, there is a lot of need for both political and practical alignment in the criteria and on the way that these funding schemes are awarded and conceptualized. And the other thing is about open science and open access policies. So we can see that there is a notable alignment with having open science and open access policies and having, of course, a lot of content available in open science, in open access. And most of our respondents do adhere to some kind of policies, either on national institutional level, or they have their own policies. And many of them, of course, comply with policies at different levels. So here you can see how it's pictured. So, of course, multiple answers were possible in this area. And how important, again, if we look at the nations, how important are the national policies? We can see that for certain countries, they are very, very important. And most of our respondents were actually referring to those national policies. For instance, France and Serbia were such examples. But also there is an interesting case with Croatia, where most of a large majority of respondents refer to the Croatian national open science policy, which actually doesn't exist. So we don't have a national policy, but it's apparent that there are other factors in play, like this national funding or the national platform, that make the appearance to our respondents that there is an alignment on the targets of open science in the country. And of course, there are some countries which have well-established open science and widely communicated open science policies, but it seems that they have limited effect on the publishers because they did not report following them. And one thing that wasn't quite expected when we were asking about policies is how important are certain national platforms informing these kind of policies. So we asked about providing links to policies that publishers or IPSPs have, and infrequently they referred us to the websites of national platforms and to policies that were found there. And therefore, we can see that the existence of publishing platforms and their strength can have real impact on the way publishing in a certain countries is formed. So platforms can play a significant role in showcasing journal policies, offering guidance for such policies, but also certain policies that are defined by platforms are then often just adopted by publishers. So this kind of policy making really has a substantial impact. And of course, platforms can serve as a gathering points for publishing communities, and therefore we can see them as certain kinds of seeds for future capacity centers, and something that Johan will say more in the next presentation. So just to conclude, we can see that countries which have national organizations that coordinate diamond IPSPs and have established mechanisms for alignment of them, regardless of the type of these organizations have much more success in reaching targets of open science and open access. So be it a national platform like in Croatia with Hrčak, or a Federation of Finnish Learned Societies, or the national research infrastructure like Open Edition in France, or the national funders like in Spain. So all those are actually places where the knowledge, where expertise, where support is gathered, and it can serve to achieve goals better. And to conclude, yes, the survey definitely showed that IPSPs are currently very sensitive to the national context they are in, and as for now, much less to the international or global context. Of course, we hope that this is something that will change in the future. And here I will stop with sharing my screen, and thank you for attention, and Johan will explain better about the future of this.
Thank you so much, Eva, for your presentation and sharing with us those outcomes of the survey, which is very interesting and also very relevant for the next presentation. So thank you so much. And I would like to introduce Johan Rorik, Executive Director at Coalition S and Co-Editor-in-Chief of the Diamond Journal Glossa. And Johan will take a look at the future and shares implications and future developments regarding Diamond Open Access Publishing. Johan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Martina. Can everybody see my screen? Just checking.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I will talk a bit about the implications for the future of diamond publishing, but in fact, Jan-Erik and Eva have already said everything. I think I'll just build a little bit on that. But before I do that, I'll go back to the DIAMAS project to sort of present it a little bit. This is a 3-year project that started in September 22 with 23 scholarly organizations in Europe. So really to show, I do this to show that this is really a common effort in Europe by various organizations coming from various backgrounds, universities, funders, library organizations, research organizations. So I think this is very important because it shows really what Diamond stands for, this common effort of all scholarly organizations to work together. And so the goal that we have, of course, is to provide the scholarly research community with an aligned scholarly communication ecosystem that is capable of implementing OA. We want to create a community of institutional publishing service providers And one of the things that we are going to do also within this project is to create what we call an IPSP registry, so a registry for institutional publishers so that they become more visible. We have that's in the making. And also, as already mentioned, which is also in the making now, the common standards, guidelines, and best practices, which we are co-creating with the communities on the ground, because we don't want to impose this from above. This is really very much a grassroots effort where we propose something, we co-create with the communities that actually edit the journals and that are institutional publishers themselves. We co-create these guidelines and adapt them in what we call the EXIP, the Extensible Quality Standards for Institutional Publishing. So I'll give you very quickly the overview of the DIAMAS project to situate this. What we are talking about today is this element that is surrounded by a red circle, namely the mapping of the landscape. This is what we are doing. The EXIP is almost finished in its second version, the version that is being co-created. So that is also in this first element. And then in the second phase, we will improve coordination, quality, and sustainability of IPSPs. That's something that we also will be working on. And then we will formulate policy recommendations for engagement. And things are moving indeed very, very quickly, as I will show in a moment. To repeat what Jan-Erik and Eva had already said is, findings about institutional publishers really show that a typical IP is institutional publisher is small enough and isolated, needs better financing, but many people are willing to cooperate to save costs. And this is also something that we see in our co-creation efforts for EXIP, for instance. And they also need support, of course, for aligning best practices and achieving sustainability. But there is a strong willingness to align with open science and good publishing practices. We see that also in the very high levels of open access percentages that Eva just showed. You can say, well, in some countries it's 90%, but all of the countries really showed 80% in these diamond journals that we are talking about. So this is really very interesting result, and it really shows that diamond open access is the way forward to achieving full open access in Europe and beyond. National level is very important. Eva already mentioned that. One of the things we see is that the national level is really something that works quite well to federate institutional publishers. That has to do, of course, with legislative environments, with funding environments, with policy environments that can be shared through institutions that share the same kind of cultural and national and legal background. So that is a strength, we believe. So you see this in Open Edition. You see that there are Open Edition with FECIT, with TSV and RACH. I can never pronounce this name. It means hamster, which I think is a wonderful name for a journal platform. So we see 500 journals, 600 journals, 200 journals in Finland, 500 journals in Croatia. These are large numbers of journals. Not only, it's not about the number of journals, of course, but the fact that these journals can thrive, that there are these numbers, means that they are very well supported by these national levels. Compare this, for instance, to Germany, not to say anything bad about our German friends, but Germany is a country of 90 million people, and there are about 285 diamond journals. And at the same time, we see that the national center is lacking. There will be coming one soon. DFG has generously made available a grant to build a national diamond center. So we hope, of course, that will be an incentive for Germany to expand the number of diamond journals in the next few years. We really think that the national level is very important. At the same time, as Eva already said, what is actually lacking a little bit is coordination between these national levels. So you see that Croatia has one policy, but Serbia has a slightly different policy, and that has consequences. It does not allow for journals to align across borders. This is also true for other European countries. So this is something that we need to work on. So how can we, at the European level, federate these journals, make sure that there is coordination, alignment across the national levels. So we need to build on the strengths of the national level, I believe, build also on the strengths and the willingness of the diamond publishers or institutional publishers to work together. And in fact, all the rest is just work of coordination, I think. So this is something that can be done. We see similar tendencies, I should insist, in diamond journals worldwide. Of course, the big example here is Latin America, Cielo and Redalica Milica, also in Latin America, but also in other countries, like, for instance, Indonesia, where Relawan Journal is uniting 20,000 journals. And then you can say, well, 20,000 journals, is that serious? But, 2,000 of those journals have passed the test of the EOJ, are in the EOJ. So that means something. It means that somebody is doing a very good job there of uniting these journals into and making sure that they correspond to international standards. The same is true for African Journals Online, for North America, Érudit in Quebec, with almost 350 journals, any scholarship in California. So there is a worldwide movement, I think, towards diamond open access that we can see in kind of federations at the national level or the provincial level or the regional level. And these are things that we should build on going forward. Then, of course, last year, there was the EU Council conclusions, which actually lend political support to diamond open access with the statement that authors should not have to pay fees and that non-profit scholarly publishing models should be supported, which we took really as a kind of a call to support diamond open access, which is something that we now need to take advantage of. This has accelerated, I think, the momentum to build a common infrastructure for not-for-profit scholar-led open access publishing. And it is very clear from the examples that I gave that this infrastructure must be international. It really it doesn't make sense to still organize this at the local, at the purely local level. What we really need is a strongly international, long-term sustainable infrastructure that enables these smaller IPs and journals to survive and to thrive, but also to align with each other. So what we really need is a very distributed infrastructure that feeds the capillaries of these small journals. This infrastructure, of course, should be distributed. So one of the things that we need, I think, as Eva already underscored, is a European capacity hub that would align the various national initiatives in Europe, linked to a set of national or regional capacity centers who deliver services and guarantee quality standards of diamond OA journals. In these capacity centers are not necessarily only national. You can also have in capacity centers at universities. You can have them at various other units. You could even have them at the institutional publisher level. So this is something that could be quite flexible, and we need to build on the strengths, I believe. So this European capacity hub then would be itself a regional capacity hub amongst others worldwide, like, for instance, Redalica Milica in Latin America, or Cielo in Latin America again. So this is what we envisage. This is something that Pierre Mounier and I presented at the Toluca Diamond Summit in October. Namely, a globally federated structure that includes 4 levels. On the outside rim, you see the community of diamond journals, books and outputs. There's thousands of journals out there. These need to be served, of course, by a national, local, and disciplinary diamond capacity center. So I'm going counterclockwise a bit. National, local, and disciplinary capacity centers. So this is the first line help for these journals. Then we have regional diamond capacity hubs that for instance, the European one, the Latin American one, or multiple Latin American ones, as is the case now, AJOL in Africa. And of course, we have to think of we could think of a North American hub. We can think of several Asian hubs. These are things that need to be developed as we go forward. And then finally, the Global Diamond Federation. This Global Diamond Federation would then coordinate the various efforts of the regional hub. So the way you have to imagine this is that each level is in contact with the next level up, as in a truly federated structure. So the diamond journals are in contact with their national national or disciplinary diamond capacity centers. The capacity centers are in relation to their regional capacity hubs, and the regional capacity hubs are in relation with the Global Diamond Federation that looks at global interactions. I'll explain this a bit more in the next few slides. So the journals, of course, should do what a journal does best. They should not, as Jan-Erik already said, they should not be running around to look for money. What they should do is focus on editorial and scientific work, soliciting reviews, making decisions, apply standards and guidelines, make sure, of course, that they own the journal. That is also very important, that there is a community-driven governance of the journal. But that is it. They should not be concerned with things that can be organized much better by the capacity center. So things like tools, administration, platforms, copy editing, typesetting, finances as well, governance and ownership, advice on legal ownership. You don't want to ask an editor of a journal that they have legal expertise on what ownership of their journal means. You want that expertise to be distributed. Guidelines, best practices, and training. These diamond capacity centers ensure that the journals reach alignment with these quality standards. They check with the journals, they work together with them. This is exactly how I work together, for instance, with Open Library of Humanities. There is an interaction between the level of the capacity center, which is Open Library of Humanities in my case, and the journal Glossa, which does the daily work of doing of editing the journal. But we are informed about guidelines that we should change and so on and so forth. So this is very important. Also, these diamond capacity centers can very easily take care of multilingualism in national languages. We see how important that is, for instance, in Croatia, in Spain, in France, and in Finland. It's not by accident that those countries have strong national centers, and that the national journals that there are many national journals in the national language there. And this is something that we should treasure and enable. And then the regional capacity hubs, of course, should ensure alignment, as I said, of these diamond capacity centers. That's the work of the hub. They should ensure complementarity, alignment of policies between the countries, streamline and create efficiencies, and organize also exchanges of specialists. What you want to form is, of course, specialists of diamond open access publishing who can go all over Europe and work all over in these various diamond capacity hubs. And then finally, the Global Diamond Federation, which UNESCO has kindly agreed to host. This is, I think, very important, because the UNESCO declaration of a few years ago made it very clear that they want diamond open access because it does not charge fees to authors and readers. And UNESCO has agreed to host the Global Diamond Federation, which will take shape in the next few months. That the Global Diamond Federation will explore technological interoperability of platforms. It will explore also exchanges of services. So you could easily imagine, for instance, diamond journals in Europe being copy edited and typeset in Mexico, and other kinds of exchanges that are possible. There should also be mutual learning. We can learn a lot, I think, from journals in South America, from the way journals in Indonesia are organized. This is something that we should take as an opportunity to learn from each other. And of course, set priorities from expansion for Diamond OA. What we want is to build a strong infrastructure that will allow also journals to flip from commercial publishers to Diamond open access. I think we should make it possible that there is a trusted infrastructure that can serve for various communities who want to live in a different world where no fees are necessary for authors or readers. So Diamond Open Access, as you know, ensures equity by not charging fees to authors and readers, and it allows also scholars to take back control of scholarly content. I think that is very important myself. What is needed for that is better alignment and better support, but we can count on them, on their willingness to cooperate. So this is basically a matter of work, of coordination, hard work, certainly, but nothing of this is unfeasible. It can even be done. This is something that is really within capacity. And we think that a well-organized national, regional, and globally distributed infrastructure for diamond open access publishing based on these very best practices like the EXIT can realize this goal. This is what I would like to end on this very positive note. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan, for these insights and having a look at the near future based on the report findings. I would like to invite all speakers now to open their camera and join us for the panel discussion. And after these enlightening presentations, I'm sure there's enough food for thought and discussion. Several questions already were posted in the chat. I would kindly like to invite all of you, if you have any questions and haven't put them in the chat yet, please write them down there, preferably including your affiliation and where you're from. And if you want to ask someone specifically, please indicate who you would like to answer, or if it's for all speakers. I'm happy that there are some questions already, so I would like to ask the first question first, and that is by Vincian Gaillard, who is volunteering to be a bit provocative, which is very much welcomed. And the question is as follows: as I understand it, financial sustainability is the challenge, and EDIB is work in progress. But we need to develop a policy narrative that goes beyond the usual "we need more money." How to do so? Jan Erik, could you be the first one to give some thoughts on this question?
Well, it's an interesting way of putting the question, because I mean, with my economics background, money is always the answer, whatever the question was. But what can we do? And one of the bees in my bonnet is that we need to organize things on a bigger scale so that we use our resources more efficiently. Not the editorial, I mean the works of the likes of Johan in editing manuscripts and evaluating them, but all the technical work around publishing needs to be done on a greater scale by cooperating internally or between institutions. That has always been one of my most important messages to my audiences over many years. But it's not easy to say how we can do that. And that is, of course, the question. But I think that is my main message is cooperation, cooperating with each other, trying to find solutions where we can use competencies over a wider range of journals and articles. Yeah.
Thank you, Jan Erik. Eva, do you have some additional thoughts?
Well, maybe I would just first like to contrast the first part of the question or the statement. So what we actually saw in the landscape report is that we can be satisfied with the amount of content that is available in open access, but not with open science practices at large, because with open science practices, we also mean availability of data, settled copyright issues, or I don't know, transparency, reporting negative results, or things like that, and in open peer review. And in those aspects, institutional publishing actually lags quite a lot behind the commercial sector. So these things need improving, and a lot. So if I'm mistaken, but from the report, that was, I think, the conclusion. And these things need resources. And one other thing I would like to say, that within this project, it is recognized that issues like sustainability and also political support are crucial. So there are dedicated work packages who are still working on those issues. And maybe we can say that, for instance, the work package on financial sustainability. We'll also have the webinar like that in 2 months. So keep an eye on the website and on announcement. And that's true. Many small IPs answer that they don't need more money, but they do need resources and support and knowledge and things like that. And then they sometimes translate to more money elsewhere, to some certain infrastructures or something like that, but also to a stronger and more stronger political support and alignment on importance of those infrastructures.
Thank you so much. Johan, do you have something to add?
Yes, I like Eva. I don't think it's a question of more money. I mean, there is money. It's just in the wrong places. Let me give it. Yeah, I mean, you know, if you see the money that is being given to commercial publishers, we could build a Diamond Hub many times over with that. To give an example, for instance, I mean, there is money in the system. You know, to give an example, for instance, the example of Germany, for 5 years, there was no deal with Germany, right? We know that was a savings. Where did that money go? I mean, I didn't see it go to publishing. It went to, you know, probably car parks at German universities or something else. But if that money had been saved or put aside to build an infrastructure for Diamond Open Access Publishing, for instance, we would not have spent an extra cent, but we would have had a very strong Diamond Open Access Publishing infrastructure in Europe. Just giving that as an example, right? I mean, of things that we don't necessarily need extra money. The existing money just needs to be rechanneled, redirected, and we should be much. And the savings that we can get from contracts within non-institutional publishers, it's called commercial publishers, could very easily be invested there. It's not only a question of money. I think also a lot of universities can contribute by in kind. Universities and other institutions can contribute by in kind contributions. This is also the case, I think, for the European Diamond Hub. It's very difficult sometimes to get new money, but it's sometimes much easier to find in-kind contributions. The entire Diamond system works on in-kind contributions, right? I myself work for free for my journal. I think a lot of academics are willing to do that or to contribute from their research time. This is something, of course, that we should register, that we should investigate what that contribution is, and institutions should also, you know, show that this is the contribution that they are making. But I think we should not forget that that in-kind contributions are certainly as important, if not more important, than fresh money. So I disagree, Vasyan. we need more. We need more money, yes, but the money is already there. It just needs to be redirected.
That brings me to a follow-up question, because if it is that simple, I mean, the report shows that from an economical point of view, why would you want to have those very small venues for institutional publishing? And yet at the same time, collaboration on more national levels doesn't seem so easy as it looks like. Eva, maybe do you have some insight on what specific stakeholders could do to take a next step towards collaboration on a higher level than the Institute?
Well, we see that some kind of collaborations already are going on and are happening on different levels, both on the kind of community gatherings of people belonging to the same discipline, for instance, or something like that, or people using the same software, like OJS or other PKP products. So we do see some international and global cooperation already. However, it is not yet enough. And I think that what was already mentioned, some sort of alignment on the political level between nations, that we already, some countries are already well on this path, but not all. So sometimes this collaboration happens from the bottom up, like a bottom up approach, and sometimes it happens top down. And this is something that's, I think, important to understand, because then we know how to do and how to approach. And again, if I can use an example that's very close to me, we have two countries that are very, very near to each other, like Slovenia and Croatia, and we see totally different approaches. In Slovenia, it's very much politically supported from the highest level, and it goes top down, and in Croatia we have more of this bottom up approach that's not yet reaching the governance level. So I don't know, there is no recipe to have for all, but we definitely need to work together. And while I am that, I would also like to say that this webinar is the first in the series, and it is going to be followed by a number of regional webinars. And there are also great opportunities to gather people across borders, to communicate and to share knowledge, experience, and then resources.
Thank you so much. If I go back to the chat, I would like to raise a question or ask a question raised by Pascal Poplin. How can we encourage the development of diamond in disciplines other than the humanities and social sciences? And will this be taken into account in the DIAMAS project? Jan Erik, could you maybe answer that question?
Well, I'm not certain I have an answer to the question itself, but it's an interesting fact from both the open access journal Diamond study and this, that we see that there is a lot of diamond activity outside humanities and social sciences. We see it in health sciences, medicine, natural sciences, and engineering sciences. So it's not so that that diamond is an unknown thing outside humanities and social sciences. In some fields, publishing takes more resources than in the humanities and social sciences, which are more or less purely directed at text. I mean, you have a lot of other things, structural formulas in the chemistry, for instance, things like that could take more than the average editor can do at his desktop. Yeah, I see chemistry is mentioned here, yes. I don't think we have discussed this in the project, so I don't have a definite answer, but yes, diamond should be a possibility, much outside humanities and social sciences. I think that is what I can say for now.
Thank you.
And I think Pierre has a comment.
Yes.
If I may, sorry to jump in the conversation, but I think a part of the answer is also linked to the question of the evaluation practice in some disciplines. So, the adoption of the diamond model in specific STM disciplines is currently blocked, in my opinion, by the evaluation practices in those disciplines. So the change of the evaluation practice of research in those disciplines could be also an enabler to help those disciplines to move towards a different scholarly communication model. And that's where, for me, it's quite obvious that a cooperation with the COARA initiative at European level is so important.
Thank you, Pierre, for this addition. Before I would like to have a look at the capacity centers, another question from Vincian. With further alignment and cooperation, is there a risk for bibliodiversity? Who of the speakers? I see Johan.
Yeah, but I always want to jump in. I don't think so, because that is exactly why we designed the structure in such a careful way to have these national hubs that can take care of multilingualism and that can protect the multilingualism of their countries in terms of the journal. So really, what we are trying to emphasize is that this is a bottom-up effort, not a top-down one. I mean, this is, I think, we should not repeat the same mistakes that we have made before, namely, farm all of these journals out to commercial publishers who were only interested anyway in the English journals that sold well and that had a large audiences, and left the rest. I mean, this is something that we also saw in the DIAMAS project. When I was asked, for instance, to look at Belgian journals. You saw very well that the commercial publishers had just picked out the nice, well-selling journals in English and had left all the rest for behind to. So this is something that we see in many countries. When the moment a journal becomes successful, they try to pick it up. So what we really need to do is the reverse. We need to protect the small journals in the various languages, make sure that they practice multilingualism in the sense that things like abstracts are made available in English, for instance, or in at least another language, that translation services are available. So we need to unlock the potential of these multilingual efforts and make sure that bibliodiversity is preserved in that way. That would be my answer to Sebastian.
Thank you so much. Could you follow up also on the question of Biljana Kozanovic, Johan, which is, are capacity hubs more about policy and recommendations, or also on the infrastructure and IT solutions?
The honest answer is I don't know yet. Because we don't know what is going to be needed yet, right? I think indeed in the main it's about recommendations and alignment and policy. That's probably also because we think that is the most urgent. I mean, infrastructures, we know that some infrastructures are already out there, right? That people use PKP or Janeway. Those are things. What we can do there is facilitate infrastructures. We can, for instance, organize trainings. That's what I said. DCHs should make sure that there are trainings available, that people can move around Europe being specialists of these of Diamond Open Access Publishing, so that the more alignment can take place also on the technical and on the service level. That's one of the things that I think is very important. But the provide the infrastructures themselves is not necessarily a role for the Diamond Hub, because there are already solutions out there that we can make use of and that we can try to distribute more efficiently, perhaps. Would be my immediate answer, but maybe Jan-Erik and Eva see this differently. So.
I would think that providing competence, advice, and guidance would be very important for capacity hubs. Policy is one thing, but how do you do it in practical terms to follow up a policy or a recommendation or a good publishing practice? And I think many journals and IPs could need help having competence made available to them to help them in getting on the right way.
Eva?
I would definitely agree. So within the project, we do plan to produce some guidelines and educational materials for institutional publishers, but also to establish these kind of networks of people that will be able to help each other. So that's kind of an important thing. And yes, maybe just one small notion, when we talk about resources, one thing that's also challenging from the sustainability point is that when we talk about institutional publishing, that means that it often happens within the borders of public institutions, and we have a limited amount of people available with certain often technical expertise that are available to each institution. So having some kind of collaboration in that respect and having that first on the national and regional level would be also already a great start. So, and I think that someone in the chat, Jeroen Zondervan, mentioned something like finding the middle ground from this bottom-up and top-down approach. So,
okay, thank you so much. We're almost towards the end of the time that we had scheduled for this webinar. To all of you, Johan, Eva, Jan-Erik, are there any results or specific topics in that very extensive report that weren't mentioned? Now is the time that you can bring it up. Anything you would like to share with the audience before we close? Johan?
Yeah, maybe I think one of the things that doesn't come out of the report, I think, is the enormous enthusiasm that we encountered with these various IPs and these that we talked to. There is an enormous goodwill. There's an enormous willingness to work together and to move this forward and to change things for the better. And I think that is something wonderful to see. It's not something that you can put on paper. It's not something that you can measure. But there is this willingness, and it's something that we can build on. It's really it's something that convinces me that the bottom-up approach is the right one. We just need to also make good on the promise of trying to organize this nationally and internationally. And with that willingness and that enthusiasm from the grassroots, I think everything is and anything is possible.
Thank you so much. Eva?
Oh, well, I can't think of anything at the moment. I am just hoping that, and it's a great thing that aside from being within this project and working on certain aspects, it's great to see that things are going along well on the international and on the global level, and seeing that we have seen only Europe in our report, but things are aligning elsewhere as well, and that's great to be part of something so big and important.
Thank you so much. And finally, Jan-Erik, some personal takeaways
Well,
that you would like to share?
my mind is a bit empty now, but I think during the work with preparing this report, I had to look through an enormous amount of data. And what strikes me is the fantastic bibliodiversity in this area and in institutional publishing all over Europe. We have every country and every city has its own solution. That means it's very varied. It's difficult to get a clear picture because of all the variation out there. But that means there's a lot of possibilities that has been used and that we can go on using. So looking at what is out there, there's a huge resource for learning and getting ideas for what one can do. So keeping your eyes open. That's a very important thing.
Thank you so much, Jan-Erik. And thank you all speakers for giving these insights of the survey, the findings of the survey as a, well, not first step, but as a step on the way to the future. A lot of work to be done yet, but also giving us more ideas of where we could go in diamondization of open access publishing. So I would like to thank all our speakers for their excellent contributions today. And I think I speak for many when I say that it was a pleasure to get more insight in the findings of the landscape survey. And thank you for the lively discussion. We very much appreciate the time that you invested to make this webinar a success. And thank you also for my colleague Oliver Blake, who worked behind the scenes to make this event a success. But most of all, a big thank you to all attendees of this webinar. I noticed that we went over 250 at one moment. So thank you all for attending, for your attention and the questions that sparked the discussion. And your input was a valuable source for success. Like said, the slides of the presentations will be slid afterwards via Zenodo. And lastly, I would like to bring again to your attention the reports mentioned before, the DIAMAS project landscape report, institutional publishing in the European research area, the results of the DIAMAS survey, and also the European landscape of institutional publishing, the synopsis of the results from the DIAMAS survey. And I would like to ask Oliver to again share those links in the chat, but they were also in the presentation, the slides of Jan-Erik. And also, like Eva mentioned, there will be more events in the near future about the survey and the report and the DIAMAS project. So please keep an eye on the DIAMAS website for more information to come. And this leaves me with wishing you all an enjoyable day, a good, depending on where you are. Thank you, and we hope to see you again. Thank you all for attending.